What happens if you remain conscious while living in reality? It sounds like an absurd question, almost redundant. After all, how could we not be conscious while we live? But think for a moment. How many times today were you truly present in what you were doing? How many conversations did you have on autopilot? How many meals did you consume without tasting the flavor? How many moments did you miss because your mind was somewhere else, another time, another reality? The truth is that we spend most of our lives in a state we could call waking sleepwalking. Our bodies walk through reality, but our consciousness wanders through labyrinths of thoughts, memories, projections, and fantasies. It is as if we were ghosts inhabiting our own lives. Imagine a diver who, instead of observing the depths of the ocean, spends all his time immersed in looking at photographs of other oceans. He is literally surrounded by wonders, but his attention is captured by representations, by shadows on the wall of the cave. That is our usual condition, immersed in reality, yet fascinated by the projections of our mind. But what would happen if, suddenly, you woke up completely? If you brought your full awareness to this moment, to this breath, to this life that is happening now, what would you discover? And why is it so difficult to sustain? When we talk about remaining conscious in reality, we are not talking about a meditation technique or a special state reserved for mystics in distant mountains. We are talking about awakening to the life you are already living. It is about recognizing that between you and the full experience of existence, there is no barrier except the veil of distraction your own mind is constantly weaving. Take a deep breath for a moment. Feel the air entering, filling the space in your chest and then leaving. Notice how, in this simple instant, you can be completely present. Notice how this is simultaneously the most natural thing in the world and, paradoxically, something we rarely do for more than a few consecutive seconds. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived his whole life in a room with opaque windows. He knew the outside world only through shadows cast on the walls, muffled sounds that reached him, and stories that others told. One day, someone opened the windows. The light that entered was so intense, the colors so vivid, the details so sharp, that he first closed his eyes, frightened. "This is too real," he thought. "I prefer my familiar shadows." This parable illustrates our relationship with full consciousness. We live so accustomed to the mental representations of reality that when bare reality presents itself, it may feel too intense, too vulnerable, too real. The Buddha discovered 2,500 years ago that human suffering is fundamentally born from our tendency to live in layers of interpretation and projection instead of in direct experience. He called this Maya, the illusion that makes us believe that thoughts about life are more real than life itself. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching reminds us, "The wise man does nothing, yet nothing is left undone." This apparent contradiction points to a state where action arises spontaneously from present awareness, without the interference of the ego that always wants to add, modify, improve, control. Rumi, the Sufi mystic, expressed this poetically. "You are not just the drop in the ocean, but the entire ocean in a drop." When we remain conscious in reality, we discover that the separation between observer and observed, between self and world, is only a mental construction. The consciousness that observes your thoughts is the same consciousness that observes the flight of a bird or the movement of the clouds. The Zen masters speak of the original mind, a state of direct perception, free of conceptual filters. It is as if we had spent our lives seeing the world through fogged glasses and suddenly removed them. Shapes become sharp, colors vibrant, sounds crystalline. But here is the first great insight. Remaining conscious in reality is not about adding something new to your experience. It is about removing the layers of distraction, interpretation, and resistance that we constantly place between ourselves and what is happening. It is a subtraction, not an addition. In all these traditions, we find the same recognition. Reality does not need improvement, interpretation, or modification to be complete. It is already perfect in its present manifestation. Our only task is to stop interfering with it through our constant mental commentary. Observe in your own life, when you are truly absorbed in an activity, whether contemplating a sunset, listening to music, or in a moment of deep connection with someone. Where is your usual chattering mind? It simply quiets down, allowing the experience to be fully lived. To understand what happens when we remain conscious in reality, we must first examine the mechanism that keeps us unconscious. Our mind has developed a sophisticated system of distraction that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, creating a virtual world inside our heads that constantly competes with present reality. This mental world is inhabited by three main characters: the collector of pasts, the architect of futures, and the perpetual commentator. The collector lives by revisiting memories, rewriting stories, brooding over resentments, or getting lost in nostalgia. The architect projects future scenarios, makes obsessive plans, and gets lost in anxieties about what might happen. And the commentator never stops narrating, judging, categorizing, and explaining everything that is happening. These three work in shifts, ensuring that we are rarely completely present. When one gets tired, another takes over. It is like having three radios turned on simultaneously at different frequencies inside your head. But why did our mind develop this system? The answer lies in our evolutionary history. For millions of years, the beings who survived were those whose minds could anticipate future dangers based on past experiences. The mind that constantly scanned for threats, planned strategies, and analyzed patterns was a crucial adaptive advantage. The problem is that this survival-oriented mind does not recognize that, most of the time, we are no longer running from predators. It continues to operate in a state of perpetual emergency, treating an unanswered email with the same urgency that our ancestors treated the approach of a lion. Rumi observed, "You carry within you the entire pharmacy needed for your healing." The antidote to this mechanism of distraction does not come from outside, but from recognizing that we have the power to choose where to direct our attention. Contemporary neuroscientific studies confirm what contemplatives discovered millennia ago. Attention is like a muscle that can be trained. Each time you notice that your mind has wandered into daydreams and you gently return your attention to the present, you are strengthening your ability to remain conscious. But here is a crucial nuance. It is not about stopping thinking or eliminating the mind. Thoughts are like clouds in the sky. They naturally appear and disappear. The problem is not the thoughts themselves, but our tendency to completely identify with them, to believe that we are our thoughts. When you remain conscious in reality, thoughts continue to arise, but you develop a different relationship with them. Instead of being swept away by the current of thoughts, you become like a tree on the riverbank, rooted, stable, observing the current pass without being carried away by it. The Vedic tradition calls this Sakshi Bhava, the state of the witness. You are not thinking less, but you are aware that you are thinking. And in this awakening of the observing consciousness, something extraordinary happens. You discover that there is a vast, silent space that contains all thoughts, emotions, and sensations. When you stop living in the virtual reality of the mind and bring your awareness fully into the present, the first thing that happens is an extraordinary sensory awakening. It is as if you had spent years watching life in black and white and suddenly discovered color. Your five senses, which had been atrophied by unconscious disuse, begin to open like flowers after a long drought. You discover that a simple apple is not just an apple. It has a specific texture, a unique weight, a particular aroma, a flavor that changes as you chew, even a characteristic sound when your teeth bite into it. The Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi wrote, "Wherever you turn, there is the face of the divine." When we remain conscious in reality, every sensory experience becomes a doorway to the sacred. The texture of a fabric beneath your fingers, the taste of water when you are truly thirsty, the sound of the wind in the leaves. All of it reveals itself as manifestations of an infinite creative intelligence. But this sensory awakening goes beyond aesthetic pleasure. It reconnects you with your body in a way you may have forgotten since childhood. You rediscover that you do not have a body, you are a body. The separation between mind and body, which conceptual thought constantly creates, dissolves in direct experience. The Taoists speak of Wu Wei, effortless action. When you are fully present in your body, actions flow naturally, without the tension and rigidity that mental control usually imposes. You walk differently, breathe differently, move differently. A natural grace emerges when we stop interfering with our spontaneous expression. This reawakening of the senses, also reveals something surprising about time. In the world of the mind, we are always running from the past, running toward the future. But the senses exist only in the present. You cannot touch a memory, you cannot taste an expectation. When your awareness fully inhabits your senses, you automatically anchor yourself in the only moment that truly exists. Now, Hildegard of Bingen, the medieval Christian mystic, called this viriditas, the green force of life that pulses through all creation. When we remain consciously present, we reconnect with this vital force that animates not only our own being, but all of existence. Notice how a small child explores the world. She is not thinking about a flower. She is completely absorbed in the experience of smelling it, touching it, perhaps even tasting it. There is no separation between the child and the exploration. She is the exploration. This is the natural state of present awareness. When you allow your senses to fully awaken, you discover that the world is not a separate object you observe from the outside, but a unified field of experience of which you are an inseparable part. The sound of birds is not out there. It happens in your awareness. The sensation of air on your skin is not something you passively receive. It is part of the continuous dance between you and existence. This sensory awakening also brings with it a quality of spontaneous gratitude. When you truly see a tree, not just mentally register tree, but perceive the incredible complexity of its forms, the silent wisdom of its presence, the generosity of its shade, how can you not feel grateful to be part of this miracle of existence? One of the most extraordinary discoveries that arises when we remain conscious in reality is the radical transformation of our experience of time. Psychological time, that feeling of constant rush, of never having enough time, of always living behind in relation to life, simply dissolves. There is a fundamental difference between chronological time and psychological time. Chronological time is functional, necessary to coordinate our activities in the practical world. But psychological time is the drama our mind creates around chronological time, the anxiety about the future, the weight of the past, the feeling that the present is never enough. When you are completely present, something magical happens. You discover that you have all the time in the world. Not because the hours multiply, but because you stop wasting mental energy rushing from one moment to another. You fully inhabit the moment you are living, and in this full inhabiting, time expands. Einstein scientifically showed that time is relative, but the contemplatives discovered experientially something even deeper, that our perception of time is completely determined by the quality of our consciousness. When we are anxious, 5 minutes feel like an eternity. When we are absorbed in something we love, 5 hours pass like an instant. Eckhart, the medieval German mystic, spoke of nunc fluens, the flowing now. For him, eternity was not a very long time, but a present so full that it completely transcends the temporal dimension. It is as if the present moment were a portal through which eternity manifests itself in time. The Zen masters have an expression: when you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. This may sound simplistic, but it points to something revolutionary. When your attention is completely absorbed in the action you are performing, there is no separate you who is always calculating how long things are taking, whether you are late, or whether you should be doing something else. This dissolution of psychological time reveals another extraordinary insight. Rushing does not make us more efficient. In fact, it makes us less present, less precise, less creative. When we stop running mentally, we discover that we can move through life's tasks with a natural efficiency that arises from focused attention. Imagine a master craftsman carving wood. He is not thinking about finishing the work quickly to move on to the next task. He is completely absorbed in the movement of the tool, in the resistance of the wood, in the form that is emerging. Paradoxically, this total absorption in the present often results in more refined work and, many times, faster than rushed effort. Rumi captured this truth poetically. The past is gone, the future has not yet arrived, and life is now. But this does not mean completely ignoring the past and the future. It means recognizing that any effective action regarding the past, such as learning from experiences, or the future, such as making sensible plans, can only happen in the present. When you remain conscious in reality, you develop what we might call temporal intelligence. You use chronological time as a practical tool, but you do not identify with the psychological drama we normally create around it. You can make plans without getting lost in fantasies about the future. You can learn from the past without getting stuck in ruminations. This release from psychological time also transforms your relationship with death. When you are fully living each moment, death ceases to be a distant threat that contaminates the present with anxiety. Instead, it becomes a precious reminder of the precious temporality of every experience. Perhaps the deepest discovery that emerges when we remain consciously present in reality is the true nature of love. Not love as emotion or feeling, though these may arise, but love as fundamental recognition, as the very substance of awakened consciousness. When you stop living in the interpretations and projections of the mind and become completely present, something extraordinary happens in your relationships. You begin to see people not through the filter of your expectations, judgments, needs, or fears, but as they truly are in this moment. And in this seeing without filters, a quality of acceptance and compassion naturally arises that does not need to be forced or cultivated. Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas said, "If you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you." What is within us, deeper than all fears and desires, is this capacity to love unconditionally, not as a feeling but as a way of perceiving. When you are truly present with someone, without agenda, without trying to change them, fix them, impress them, or get something from them, a sacred space is created where both can simply be. In this space, the most genuine moments of human connection often occur. Ramana Maharshi, the Indian sage, taught that love is our natural state, not something we need to acquire, but something we are when we stop interfering with our essential nature. When the mind stops creating stories about people, about how they should be different, about what they did in the past, about what they could give us or take from us, what remains is pure consciousness, meeting pure consciousness. But this love that arises from conscious presence is not limited to human relationships. It extends to all of existence. When you are truly present in nature, there is no separation between you and the tree you are observing, you and the river you are listening to, you and the sky you are contemplating. An intimate recognition arises. All of this is a single manifestation of the same creative consciousness. The Sufis speak of ishq, a divine love that is not directed at any specific object, but is the very atmosphere in which awakened consciousness dwells. It is as if the entire universe were an expression of creative love, and when we remain present, we align ourselves with this fundamental current of existence. This discovery of love as recognition also transforms our relationship with ourselves. The constant inner war between what we are and what we think we should be, between the aspects of ourselves we accept and those we reject, dissolves in the light of present awareness. You discover that you can observe your own fears, angers, sadness, without fully identifying with them and also without trying to eliminate them. They become like clouds passing through the sky of your consciousness. And in this compassionate observing of yourself, an intimacy with yourself develops that you may never have experienced before. Lao Tzu wrote, "Knowing others is wisdom, knowing yourself is enlightenment." But this self-knowledge does not come through psychological analysis or mental introspection. It comes through simple presence with yourself, moment after moment, without judgment. When you remain conscious in reality, you discover that you do not need to change anything in yourself to be worthy of love. Love is not something you earn through perfection or achieve through effort. It is what you are when you stop interfering with your essential nature. And perhaps the most surprising discovery is this. When you love in this way, not as need but as recognition, you become a channel through which love can flow freely into the world. Not because you decided to be loving, but because you removed the obstacles that were blocking its natural expression. Now you have seen it in the awakening of the senses, in the dissolution of psychological time, in the love that arises as pure recognition. You have seen how remaining conscious in reality is not a special technique or a state reserved for mystics, but simply the recovery of your natural way of being. Like the diver who finally stops looking at photographs and allows himself to directly experience the depths of the ocean, you can choose at any moment to abandon the virtual world of thoughts and fully inhabit the life that is happening now. But here is the deepest truth. This is not a state you achieve and then maintain forever. It is an invitation that renews itself at every instant. With every breath, you can choose between living in the interpretations of the mind or in present reality. At every moment, life is asking, will you come dance with me? Or would you rather keep rehearsing the steps in your head? The Sufi poet Hafez wrote, "I wanted to see again, so I returned to this world." This is the great irony. We do not need to go anywhere special to find the sacred. We only need to return completely to where we already are. So as you leave this reflection, take with you this simple but revolutionary understanding. The life you have been seeking, the peace you have been chasing, the love you have been longing for, all of it is available in this moment. Not as a reward for spiritual practice or as the result of external changes, but as your natural inheritance when you simply stop running from the present. Take a deep breath and feel your feet touching the ground. This is the only real moment you have. This is the only place where life happens. This is the only instant where transformation is possible. And if you get lost again in the stories of the mind, and you will get lost because that is part of the human condition, remember that every awakening is a new beginning. There is no failure in being distracted. There is only the eternal opportunity to return. The question that opened our journey today now echoes with new depth. What happens if you remain conscious while living in reality? The answer cannot be fully captured in words because it is a discovery you make by living it. But I can offer you this final invitation. How about discovering it for yourself? How about just for today experiencing what it means to be completely here? No commitment to a specific practice, no pressure to achieve some special state. Just the gentle curiosity of a child exploring an infinite garden. The universe is constantly whispering a secret in your ears. You already are what you are seeking. You are already home. You have always been free. To hear this whisper, you only need to be still enough, present enough, conscious enough. And in this conscious silence, in this fullness of being, you will discover that remaining conscious in reality is not something you do. It is something you are.